on the road. Let us begin our slightly late evolution hour here on the 17th of February 2025 in this year of impending doom. And of course, tortuganwordpress.com has scads of freebie PDFs, all sorts of stuff that may be shared and run amok on so many different topics. So, as I said, I'm a little bit late today, and it's been a hectic day here. We had some snow in Spokane, so we had to clear away driveway and things like that, and also some flooding in my basement where pipes occasionally can go blub, blub, blub. And fortunately, I got a wet vac that I inherited from my sister when she moved to Louisiana that permits me to clean that up. But it's still a laborious process involving dumping the thing outside and then bringing it in and filling it up again and blah. And depending on how much gunk gets floating around in the laundry room, it can take a while. So pardon for a slight delay and kind of the thinness of the circumstance of that. But we shall continue. As you know, we are plowing through source by source by source through the deliciously creationist titans, dinosaurs and such. And of course, this chapter has been on the pterosaurs, and it's kind of winding down on the matter. They're a big mix of kind of generic sources because they've been in this gee whiz mode of, ooh, pterosaurs were amazing. Ooh, they could fly, all of which is perfectly amazing and wonderful. But none of that work's coming from creationists. It's all coming from secondary regular scientist community, and some of the stuff is kind of filtered through New Scientist and a few other little sidebar things. But once in a while, as you know, they will be bumping into a technical paper. And this one on the mix is another open access one, Witten and Habib from 2010, which is comparing pterosaurs and bird flight and their dynamics and how much flightlessness, functional flightlessness was taking place amongst the really big pterosaurs, Quetzalcoatlus and all that crowd, versus how much they could fly in a gliding mode, et cetera, et cetera. And it turns out to be a fascinating issue, and they take issue with some of the prior works that kind of tended to overestimate the flight capabilities of some of these larger pterosaurs. Anyway, Sarfati and Tay cited the Witten and Habib paper only in relation to how fast they could fly. Wow, gee whiz, isn't that wonderful? Except, by all means, please read the paper. It's an absolutely delightful one. Implicit in all that are the paleo environments of their Mesozoic world, that there is a difference between the smaller pterosaurs that apparently are living in a coastal environment, and they're often trapped when they're fossilized in marine sediments, as opposed to the big pterosaurs, the monster ones, Quetzalcoatlus type, which tend to be inland and are not clearly associated with a marine environment. Well, how can they figure that out unless the taphonomy and the details of the deposit can lead to that, and it's not supporting big slosh modality? Secondly, kind of ironic, given the fact that sometimes you could have well-preserved pterosaurs and sometimes not. In the big slosh, why don't we have as abundant of fantastically well-preserved ones on a scale that we could match up with, say, mastodons and other things that are preserved for much more recent environments? And in which case, how come we don't get full DNA from these little critters? Well, that's because they lived a long, long time ago, and their bodies are not preserved at a level that you can find in some of these rarer examples of things being flash frozen and the like. So all of this ultimately is disconfirming things in relation to the flood model. At the same time, again, I call your attention to the paleogeography, paleobiology angles. That is a thing that no creationist, I think, is ever going to be able to get to a level to explain any of that. They'll get generic little cartoons. You find a little bit of that popping up with Andrew Snelling and that crowd, but it doesn't get any more detail than that, at least so far. And I'm not holding my breath that they're going to pull this little thing off. A little part two relates to another installment of our Casey Luskin 800 plus papers. And a friend of mine who's been watching the show says that, gosh, it's boring. I mean, you get on every week and you're saying there's nothing here. And every week it's more nothing here. That's the point. It's that I think Luskin and the people that compiled this, that included Jonathan McClatchy, must have felt that the sheer avalanche of hundreds and hundreds of technical papers, and the vast majority of them are in fact quite recent, in the last couple of years or so, that allude to retrotransposons and ALUs and the like, in and of themselves are supporting their notion that the majority, as in 50% or more, of junk DNA is functional and wink, wink, nudge, nudge, presumably designed by the fantastically clever, unspecified wink, wink, nudge, nudge, Jesus Christ designer. But in fact, as I pointed out early in the series, we encountered one paper that was older, that the phrasing of it might theoretically leave open an opportunity to have more than the arrangement that Dan Stern Cardinale and others worked on, which is a small percentage of each one of these little categories, which can add up altogether to maybe like 20% of the genome would be composed of these retro elements. But that's still way below that 50%, and let alone way below the near unity that has been the trope that occurs in the more broad intelligent design community, where hello purple, where the majority of believers in that department have been insisting that functionally all of it is designed. And that's because their model doesn't like the idea that there is dumb shit in the genome. Theoretically, your young Earth creationists have an easier job of it, because they can theoretically attribute theodicy problems, which we've been poking up about how they can just attribute it to the fall. It's a catch-all thing. But the intelligent design camp doesn't really feel comfortable with that argument. It's not a big deal in their apologetics. And instead, they have the wonderful, the perfect design, which, of course, then gets down to the grubby details, really? So I got two papers from 2021 from Wang et al. On RNA editable sites, and they're using ALUs as a test case. So it's functionally nothing new. It's a new technique that they've developed that you could apply to the genome to identify. They thought the huge list of technical is intimidating. Yes, at the risk of like Hercule Poirot in Murder on the Orient Express, who at one point was saying, that somebody had to say, well, the murderers were not expecting you to be on the train, Monsieur Poirot. And he would say, I was hoping that someone other than me would say that. But yeah, I have to be arrogant and Poirot-ish and say, yeah, that's just an open challenge for me. You give me a big, long list of boring detail, and I'm going to look the damn stuff up. Just as, in fact, part of the things that I'm dealing with in terms of the new cosmology I'm working on is a paper from 2006 from Jonathan Henry, who's a minor character in the young Earth creationist camp. And that it's a thing on nucleosynthesis and the like. And what I dive into as important are his sources, which he has a pretty good chunk of them, which I then, bless my little heart, track down. If they're technical papers, I don't give a rat's ass about whether he cites a creationist work, although occasionally I'll make use of it. And he cites some real loony stuff in here. There's stuff from, Jonathan Sarfati's Refuting Compromise book, and this fellow Bile, God and the Cosmos from 2001. I mean, really? Did you want to bring? There we go. Supposedly we're back on connection. Hi, Brian. Yeah, so you can see on this that I have my little notes and my boxes and my little PDF things. That's where I'm tracking down the material. And so everything that's in the paper where he's citing a technical source, I'm making sure that it's not only in my data field, and big chunks of it weren't. So a lot of it is older material on cosmology issues, but it then brings up issues, and then I'm following up on the topics to find out what has happened in the scientific literature since, et cetera, and so forth and so on. this then gives me a grand measure in my little master spreadsheet where I can keep track of what gets cited in the evolution literature and what doesn't. And that's how I come up with they're missing 90% of the data field thing. It's because of the direct details that we can see on the source material. Anyhow, so that Wang paper was not really helping Luskin's case at all. It's just a propositional argument about how you're going to have a new tool to use. Goody gumdrops. The other one, Floriana et al. From 2021, is much more interesting. It's on ALU exonization, and it's explicitly noting the disease capabilities of the process. And since they're talking about how ALU can get expressed and become functional in a genome, it's implicit again that most ALUs aren't that, because why would there be an excess for something that was already designed and functional? That would be meaningless. So an exonization of a retrotransposon means that it's being converted into a functional thing. Now, this can add up to a lot of things, but remember, there are an awful lot of these retrotransposons. So, for example, the brain examples that are discussed in that case are 947 ALU exons that they study, which is not trivial, and it's important in our little noggins up in here. But that's a drop in the bucket compared to the fact that there are over 1 million plus ALUs in the genome. So it's still not in any way getting to their 50% threshold. Oopsie, oopsie, oopsie. Yeah, hi. Hi, Brian. This then sidebar that I've been doing on this Henry paper brings up all this little delicious stuff. Oh, hi, Lisa. I started a little bit late because it's been a grinding day with the snow and the basement flooding and all the other little crap going on. Plus, I'm diving into the cosmology material. And this was an area that I had admittedly a great deal of trepidation on. I covered it almost non-existently in the old tip work from 20 years ago that's up at the website, shameless plug, because it was an area that a lot of the technical material wasn't available. And frankly, an awful lot of the creationists kind of skirted around it too. Duane Gish was kind of notorious for not really wanting to defend a lot of the core doctrines of creation science, and the cosmological stuff was there as well, apart from just saying no one's ever seen a star form or something like that, the kind of tropes that pop around in there. But holy smokes, the dynamic is very, very different today, to where the vast majority of the technical literature I discover is open access at monthly notices of the Royal Astronomical Society and astrophysics journals and astronomy journal and so forth. And there's an awful lot of journals involved. So one of the little issues that popped up as a sidebar of this Henry paper was alluding to the issue of whether cold dark matter accounted for galactic rotations in that nicely. And he cites a couple older papers from this fellow McGraw, who's a very renowned astrophysicist, who is pushing and is a firm believer in an alternate model, which can kind of dispense with, in varying degrees, dark matter, the modified Newtonian gravitation model, which is usually referred to by MOND in an acronym. And there's been a ping pong match back and forth as to trying to figure out whether they can test this model against the other. And it all relates to how galaxies are turning and little dwarf galaxies that are orbiting them, and the shape of the spiral arms, and then the issue of, ultimately, a lot of this stuff is boiled down to how much of the dark matter would be in a big sphere or attenuated in a disk, which turns out to have a big difference in all of these little number crunching that they're doing, where you're dealing with very small objects seen very far away, and you have lots and lots and lots of them. And so now you're looking at the average elements of things to try to poke around what's going on in here. So it's an intriguing little background side issue where papers are coming up and down and in and out, and things are like the margin of error analysis and all of that stuff. Well, one of the elements that I'm dealing with in the whole cosmology chapter is that this is a Pyrrhic victory for young Earth creation, because they can cite all of this patch all they like, but it doesn't. It works. Okay. Am I still? No, my little clock. There we go. Think. Yes, my clock start again. I guess I'm back online. Oh, what is? Holy smokes, that's an interesting question. Which, by the way, come on, come on, come on. Oh, my clock is not running again. Come on, back online, you bloody little bastards. Shit. Yeah, the timer stopped. No, it's updating to 50. There we go. We seem to be back online again. We had a little brief. There we go. Yes, what is dark matter? That's in fact an issue which I'm hoping to explain in a very clear so that everybody understand what the hell's going on. You have two things that's going on: dark matter and dark energy. The whole dark matter thing came about because of some work that was done decades ago, back in the 20th century, on galaxy rotation. And it turns out that the way the spirals and things are turning was such that there seemed to be an awful lot of mass that wasn't visible if you just look at the visible stuff, the glowy things that we can see in galaxies. And that's when some people began to work out the idea that there might in fact be dark matter, and maybe we don't know what the hell that is to this day, but you can kind of sense the things in the terms of the bigger picture of stuff. And so they were very quickly coming to the conclusion that most of the universe is composed of there's more dark matter by far than there is matter that you can see, baryonic matter as it is, the kind of stuff that you can see. That dark matter's only property would seem to be that it affects gravity. And whether or not that's meaning that it's not a particle, and maybe it's like a bending of space-time or something. I have my own little prejudices on this little matter. But anyway, it's an ongoing, fascinating little mystery. Now, the next little wrinkle in turn, when they were measuring more and more distant galaxies, that they could see that there was a phase when it, and the modeling that they were doing in the Big Bang cosmology suggests that there was the universe, early stages of it is like in a couple of seconds. And then in the first 3 minutes, an awful lot of stuff has happened. And in that phase, there's the inflation part where the universe goes and then continues on to expand. So there's this big jump part. And then it's being pushed apart, and perhaps pushed apart more rapidly today because of this other stuff, dark energy, which is also hideously mysterious, but can be seen by the behavior of the way the galaxies are functioning. And it turns out, at least according to the standard model, to be even more dominant than dark matter. So most of the universe is apparently composed of dark energy, and then a small chunk is dark matter, and a little tiny little sliver, a few percentage points, is the matter that we are used to that make up us. So, boy, that knocks us into a car. Without the dark matter, gravitational attraction is not enough to keep galaxies from flying apart. Yeah, there's a whole bunch of elements about what holds galaxies together, and also the further dynamic of are the same processes running in galaxies early in the universe versus later on. And this gets down to things like what the vector equations are for matter in the early universe, where you have slight changes could have enormous effects. And it's a whole bunch of little sidebars on that. So dark matter, dark energy becomes the kind of soft tissue trope that floats and hovers along in creationist apologetics as they're coming in from the sideline looking at the stuff that's going back and forth as to is dark matter a thing, and what the hell is it if it's a thing, and dark energy is, if that is a thing, and what the hell is it if it's a thing. So is antimatter dark matter? No. Antimatter is just matter with the negative thing. And you get some really weird circumstance. In fact, I've always loved Richard Feynman's statement that a positron, which is an anti-electron, is just a normal electron that's going backwards in time. And you go, okay, there we go. Yeah, baryonic material. It's composed of baryons, which are the little bits and pieces that compose stuff. So if you're an old fart like me, you will kind of remember, see, when I was coming up through school in the 50s and 60s, you would have the kind of billiard ball solar system atoms where you have electrons and protons and neutrons and little orbiting electrons. Isn't that sweet? And you could get a kind of sense of the scale and how small the nucleus was compared to the atom as the whole, and so forth and so on. But during my lifetime, as we start, the physics of all this stuff was actually going on in tumult in the 30s and 40s and 50s, all during this time, but it wasn't filtering down to the public level that you would see on your little science shows that you might see on regular television. Yes, his Unicron's blood. Barry isn't a newly discovered species of dinosaur. Oh, that would be baryonyx. Yes, that would be baryonyx, which I can't remember what the hell why it's called that, or not. I don't think it has anything to do with baryons. I think it has to do with the region in Britain that it was found in, but I'd have to look all that little part up. Anyway, so they started to work out a much more complex subatomic theory, where you started having quarks, which started out as kind of a joke word in physics, but eventually became the thing. That's often the Big Bang was an insult term that was used by Fred Hoyle because he didn't like the idea. A lot of these terminologies will come about as somebody's little snark that the physicists will go, yeah, okay. Anyway, so you've got quarks now that are the components, and they're weird things that have like 1/3 charge, and you can combine them in various things, and you can build up the various particles by these things. And there's different air quotes flavors, and you've got charm and up and down, and it's got a very weird whimsical quality to it. Then underneath that is there something underneath that? And so that's where string theory comes in, which that group, which is again another controversial hypothetical thing. Strings are like vibrating things that they just look a little like strings in their conception, and so they call them that. But at any rate, those would be the things that theoretically would be composing the quarks. And the reason why string theory is intriguing is because that's part of the physics that theoretically can link up with gravity and the relativity part and the quantum theory part that relates to subatomic particles, which are operating in completely different mathematics and completely different frames. One of them, your relativistic stuff, is operating at cosmic scales down to us, and then all of this subatomic material is running at the bottom end of things, where everything is probabilistic and particles don't necessarily exist as things. Electrons are waves of probability and all that kind of stuff. So the GUT, the grand unified theory, is the holy grail of modern physics, which brings us back around to that dark matter, dark energy crap. Because what it implies when we're looking at the universe and we have a model and it explains a lot pretty damn well. I mean, you can explain how elements are being formed in stars. There's a hell of a lot that is accounted for quite nicely. And yet, at the little edges, as we get better telescopes and looking farther and farther back and see galaxies forming quite early and other little bits and pieces, that there's the fuzzy bits are not quite. And that's the reason why you can have these debates between the Mon camp and the dark matter camp about the stuff. Neither one string or loop has been confirmed. Yeah, exactly. And we've not been able to detect, or in part, dark matter is an obvious example. If you have something that doesn't do anything except affect space-time through gravity, how do you detect it? It's bad enough with neutrinos that go through the universe. Billions of neutrinos are going through as we speak. And they're ghost particles that, if they have a mass, it's extremely negligible. And therefore, it's like going through crap through a goose, as Patton would say. And it's difficult to detect them. In the same way, gravity waves were very difficult to detect. That's another thing that relates to the whole cosmological structure. This had been predicted, and gradually they've been able to find actual signs of gravity waves, which are also connecting to the standard model and to dark matter and other things. So it becomes quite abstruse and fascinating. So you got the one data set that the scientists are doing, grappling over these theoretical models. And then you have carping from the sidelines the young Earth creationists, and it's only the young Earth creationists, who are complaining about this because they have their model that does not allow the Big Bang. Ironically, given how many weird circumlocutions go on in the creationist set with Hartnett and Jason Lyle and these other ones that are kind of the theoreticians, and Jonathan Henry in this area. Why are they so committed to dropping the Big Bang? They could just as easily say, God, let there be Big Bang, kaboom, but yet compress everything and do it super duper fast the way they do with accelerated radioactive decay and all of that. And they're willing to argue miracles to resolve heat problems and that. So why not just adopt it? So this, in part, I think, has to do with the obsessive structure of that Henry Morris, Duane Gish traditional creationism that they really can't get off. How do you detect dark matter? You need a pair of dark matter sunglasses. Why, of course, polarized to see dark matter. Theoretically, you could build, there's a couple ways you could do it. One is to have instrumentation so precise that they can delineate very tiny gravitational things through gravitational lensing and a lot of this other stuff. And they're beginning to do that with the James Webb Space Telescope and other things. And they started with some of the earlier things. There's an awful lot of space telescopes that get Boomerang and Gaia, and there's a whole bunch of ones that we'll be alluding to in the book. The other approach is through particle accelerators that can artificially interact with things in ways that can theoretically test out various models and particle bits. But of course, you get to the limit of what you can do in a particle accelerator that you can build on the planet. I mean, if you have to build a particle accelerator that's like, say, the size of Saturn's orbit, that's probably going to be kind of expensive. Let's see if Tesla could build it. Yeah, let's find out about Elon Musk and move on. I do want him to plant the flag on Mars, or at least be on the first flight to Mars, and we'll see whether it gets there or not. But anyway, recently they measured a wave at LIGO from a supernova that arrived before the gamma. It's turned some assumptions on its heads. Yeah, there's always the, and I can guarantee you that if it's something that gets astronomers all up in arms, odds are that somebody, David Kopej and a few of the other creationists, will do little blips on it at Ax and Fax and the various apologetic websites. Whether they continue to blip about it is the other matter, and that's why part of the process that I have in the books is to trace the ups and downs of the creationist apologetics. What stuff do they just bring up as like gee whiz, and then they drop the subject and don't discuss later on when things start getting complicated? And there's quite a lot of issues in the cosmological field where that seems to be the case. For example, this bit about the Mond stuff doesn't seem to come up a great deal about it. There's bits about certain aspects of gravitational things that are not really brought up much in the creationist thing. And of course, we're riffing off the very beginning of it. Yes. Oh, yeah. That was the thing when the Big Hadron Colliders and these big particle accelerators were initially being built. There was this panic. This was closer to like the Y2K period, when we would accidentally make a black hole, and that would be the end of everything. Well, spoiler alert, it didn't happen. So there we go. All that kind of. Anyway, so the idea of tracing all of these little ups and downs, get a better historical picture, because creationism evolves sometimes. Ideas that were once pathologically important kind of fade away over time or get mutated over time. And then the issue that so few of the creationists are in the field to interfere much with it. There's actually probably more creationists who do kind of geology, paleontology stuff than you do physicists. And although most of the creationist physicists have legit degrees and occasionally publish legit science papers, Hartnett up in that category. They're really off in the corner, and they do little things in conferences, and people might titter at them as they go by, but they're not really having much of an impact on stuff. But anyway, if you move over to the intelligent design camp, and of course to the older creationist camp, the U Ross crowd, holy smokes, they just love the Big Bang. The Big Bang is creation ex nihilo up this yin yang. So they don't have any problem with it at all, and therefore they don't have to have any problems over the cosmology that's connected to it. Although you get some just hilarious attempts to contort the days of creation to fit the cosmic scheme, and what's his name? The guy starts with he's a Jewish physicist, Kabbalistic thinker. And you get a little bit of that kind of little sidebar stuff, and it involves an awful lot of misplaced concreteness. It's a mess. But your young Earth creationists, I think, probably are reluctant to accept the Big Bang cosmology because it has stars being developed way after the universe has already begun, and our star is what, 10 11 billion 9 10 11 billion years after the beginning of the universe, so it's a long time frame, whereas the creation science model has all the stars, the sun and the moon, being made on day 4, which is just shortly after everything. So it's difficult to bend it around. It takes energy to initiate a black hole of under 10 solar masses, and that has never been found. Yeah, it's kind of hard to get enough energy that's equivalent to 10 solar masses plugged in to a particle accelerator. So darn it all, we are going to miss that thing, although we still have the prospects of asteroids impacting us and all the other fun stuff that can be terribly annoying. We'll see what happens if we can manage to survive Trump 2.0, which is another little sidebar thing. Anyway, as we are about halfway into the show, let me call attention to our dear sweet patrons, without whom things would be dicier than they are here in Spokane, Washington. Thanks, everybody, our colleagues and researchers and assistant researchers and friends and all of our legacy patrons over the years who have come and helped and had to move on because of whatever. And remind everybody that if your financial circumstance is such that you can't afford the luxury of little old man RJ blither blathering every week on this channel, look after your own house. But I can assure you that everybody that has stuck with us, I am deeply appreciative, because that and the little dribble of book royalties and Social Security, that's my income. I'm not monetized on here. You'll notice there's no commercials. You could argue that what idiot would want to put a commercial on a show that is pathetic and paltry as this one? I'm not arguing with you, but at any rate, they do know it's not philosophical nothing, is it? Well, that whole bit, in fact, one of the things that's kind of a delightful sidebar from what I'm doing because of the Paralogs of Phileas Fogg novels up in the corner. And they're ripping good yarns, and I'm knee deep on book 3, and a lot of the cosmological issues that are plaguing things are going to be popping up in the 4th novel that relates to where Mr. Fogg's father came from and what the mysterious transdimensional beings are doing, tinkering around and bumping into our universe. And that allows me to kind of get a sense. There was an awful lot, as it turns out, quite a lot of speculation about the idea of what we would now call either multiverses or metaverses back in the 19th century, as people thought about the implications of things. And the issue is whether the universe was infinitely old or not. If it was finite, when did that happen? And would it go on forever or not? And all of these little sidebars of things. And so the issue of what occurs before the Big Bang, and, is it something from nothing, or was all the stuff that makes up the universe still there? And since time-space is what's generating in the Big Bang, is there a time outside of time? Does this have any questions? Does this have any meaning? And it's the case of where the physics basically goes tilt, 601 error, like Andromeda strain, to where it can't answer the question. Now, you can develop physics, and it has to be consistent with what we can observe in the universe. So that's an example of string theory and others, that Sabine Hossenfelder would be all piffly about, because so much of the physics is effectively trying to retrofit the model to fit the data field, which that's the case. But still, all of them are going to be bumping up against a brick wall of what do you do if, is there a thing or something or universe or whatever prior to Big Bang stuff? And there's no way to find out. Can I find a black hole so I can be dropped into a parallel universe? Yes. Well, I'm afraid, unfortunately, with Trump 2.0, it looks like we are in a parallel universe already. We've gone into the Star Trek's alternate timeline thing with a vengeance. But we'll see how this works out and if our republic manages to survive. And I'm not entirely unoptimistic in this area. It's going to be a bumpy ride. It's going to be a tough go in a lot of areas, and a lot of people are going to find a lot of the mythologies that they had about people that they admired, and others are going to crash and burn over the next few years. And so, what's going to happen is going to be very exciting indeed. If they can avoid at the moment, well, it seems highly unlikely that if Putin and Trump get together and make some sort of Munich Pact, peace in our time dismemberment of Ukraine. The Ukrainians are no reason why they should accept it. And there's probably enough activity going on in Europe that will not want to go along with any Munich Pact style derangement on here. Even Marco Rubio, it's entirely possible that he may end up having a very short shelf life in the Trump administration if he balks on this kind of thing, although he's shown already his ability to swallow an awful lot of guff from Trump, including vile insults and that. Little Marco Rubio. It's a curious operation. You need a Rosen bridge for that. 2 black holes, one in each location, and tidally and entangled for that. Yeah. Yeah, there's a whole bunch of abstruse physics in which when people write stories about time travel or tunneling, being able to get from one place to another way faster than the speed of light, there's theoretical physics that can theoretically make it possible, and you can make some fun little stories on it, but it's not established as such. So we don't have any transdimensional portals or warp drive and that we can deal with. Totally locked and entangled. Yeah. Although there's enough weirdness in the universe about quantum entanglement of particles and all that kind of stuff that it opens up theoretical possibilities. But it's easier to do novels based upon that than others. So I'll have a fun time in book 4 of the Paralogs novels of having discussions about my notions about the universe and the metaverse and multiverses that I think might be a hierarchy of things, just in the same way that we have turtles all the way down for particles made up of quarks, made up of strings, made up of something else, made up of something else, made up of something else, down with no end. There's no reason why the universe can't be absolutely wackaloon mysterious, because we've already figured that out from quantum theory and the fact that a particle is both a wave and a particle, electrons, and that what it's doing at a given moment is whether you're observing it or not. And so all of that spookiness that frankly bothered Einstein, as if his relativity theory wasn't weird from a different direction. You can see why people in the 20s and 30s who may have become familiar with advanced physics were going, what? And then you've got advanced music and jazz and women smoking in public and the modernist art and modernist music and all that. Everything was just making them all discombobulated. And frankly, more, I think, discombobulated than the level we are today, where the kind of things that we might think of as gear shifts are really almost kind of little minor tweaks at the edges of conceptuals of things. The problem is when you would still need negative energy to ride it. As far as we know, does not exist at all. Yeah. Well, in the same way, there's always the discussion on monopoles. Regarding dark matter, there's a bunch of issues about could it be the little WIMPs, the weakly interacting particles, that it's not looking good for WIMPs. Oh, sorry, I'm a WIMP. I'm sorry that our sect isn't working. Then there's axions that are other little weird little things that have their little ups and downs, and little groups advocating those. Theoretically, some totally new kind of particle might be the case, but trying to fit all that in with the big soup of existing particles, and there are, if memory serves me, there are a lot of the particles just pop in and out of existence over tiny frames. But the point is that total, they have as many particles as there are elements in the periodic table. I mean, it's not a small number. It's not just electrons, protons, and neutrons anymore. You got mesons and all these other cute little things. The MAGAs are getting tired of Musk. Well, wouldn't you get tired of Musk? Trump, of course, has an ego the size of Mount McKinley, Mount Denali. And so I'm sure, however, he kind of tempers it for the moment. And frankly, it's kind of an amazing amount of temperament of kind of keeping himself dampened down. because Musk is simultaneously has got an ego as big as Trump's, and two, he's way richer than Trump is for real. And boy, either one of those must be an annoyance. But he must be finding Musk as a potential bureaucracy slayer sufficiently useful to the purposes of that kind of Project 2025 extremism that he's kind of marinated in over there, Federalist Society bunch, and Heritage Foundation, that he's willing to tolerate and not clutch onto the thing. Maybe as soon as Musk leaves the room, he throws ketchup at the wall or something in frustration. We won't know probably until the blabbermouths start telling me about it. So anyway, that's a little sidebar on the subject. Anyway, so it's fun to detail. Here we have our universe. Let's start with the small picture. And we're finding that it's kind of filamentous, and you've got huge clusters of things. It looks like kind of little tendrils of galaxies stuck around in the whole universe as a whole, with lots of empty space in between. And presumably that has come about because of the tiny little variations that were taking discontinuities, and maybe the distribution of dark matter and the little frizzle that was occurring when matter and antimatter were vaporizing early in the universe. A bunch of possibilities are going on. But anyway, my suspicion is that that is the reason why we have a universe that's not all galaxies all uniformly done like little dots on a page. But we can only look out to about 45 billion light years in either direction, at which point we're at the thing where everything that is out there expanded, light hasn't reached us yet. And so you're going to have stuff popping in from the periphery, and they're going to be incredibly redshifted because they're so far out and moving so far and fast away from us. So how big the universe is beyond that and how much there is interesting. And that relates to whether the universe eventually collapses on itself or keeps expanding or whatever. And that relates to how much dark energy there is, blah, blah, blah. So, see, Musk's kid embarrassed Trump. Oh, yes, that was sweet there. What? Yes, you shut up now. You're not the president. My daddy's the president, or something to that effect, which I'm sure burnished Mr. Trump's insatiable ego no end. So, yeah, he'll want to axe some more agencies as a result and get rid of some more judges. They've gutted a lot of the immigration judges. I think they've tossed out 20 of them, which is going to make it even slower to do actual immigrant processing for kicking them out. So that's part of the thing, that they're their own worst enemy. But anyway, aside. So is there any stuff beyond the universe we know? So one way of conceiving it is there's our little island universe, and then over in the next county, billions, trillions, quadrillions, quintillions, who cares? Far away, maybe, are other island universes so far away from one another that even in trillions of years of expansion, maybe they'll never bump into each other, or maybe they might bump into each other. That's another little issue about these kind of hyperdimensional brains, BRANES, that are membranes that are thinking that our universe is the interaction of these huge hyperdimensional things, and when they cross, it produces a universe as we know it. There's all sorts of possibilities, untestable because we can't get outside and look. But at any rate, you can envisage then the theoretical possibility that you got multiple galaxies, multiple universes. That the next question is, within this multiverse of universes, that are theoretically accessible, if you get in a little spaceship and move out, and you would then drop past the universe that we know of into no man's land where there be dragons, could you theoretically reach any of these other universes or not? Maybe it's a not. Maybe universe breaks down and you come around a bounded edges, so there's no way of getting there. Who knows? Lots of possibilities. But would each universe need to have the same physics laws that we have in our universe? Maybe, maybe not. Does time run in the same direction in another universe compared to ours? Maybe, maybe not. Maybe there's a super untestable is the key word. Yes, bubble universes. Yeah, all of that. So we're so far out into the let's just make up shit and think about it level that it's way beyond any conceptual things that we can do. And why would you expect anything else when you're outside of the whole universe and you're thinking about the possibilities of stuff? But I'm not even done yet. Because so you've therefore got this theoretical circumstance of all these little island universes, and are there a finite number of them, or could there be an infinite number of them? Would they have to be a countable infinity, natural numbers versus an uncountable infinity? Can you have pi number of universes? Does this have any meaning? If it has any meaning, is the universe even weirder than we imagine? Well, it's already pretty shit and weird, so maybe, who knows? But all of that would be in one big metaverse or a multiverse. However, think about that then as a little flat pancake. That is the set of that multiverse in which our universe is one of its components. Could there be other multiverses that would be in a metaverse that are outside of us in a different dimensional plane, or a brain going in the other direction or something, to where we're way past the ability of just seeing stuff? And would these have to have the same physics that we know of, or could they have completely different ones? And could there be only a finite number of metaverses, or could there be an infinite number of metaverses? If at that stage you're going, holy moly, have you been smoking something, RJ? No, this is just the expansion and thinking about all the different possibilities of things on ever larger scales. There is kind of a bottom to the universe in terms of any, and is this the case for every universe? When you get down to Planck time, which is, we also have to discuss that in the book. The Planck unit is thought, named after the physicist Planck, where untestable is the key word. Yeah, duh. But it's sometimes used as the amount of time it takes matter to cross the nucleus of a hydrogen atom. And that's kind of the smallest you can get. It's like 10 to the minus 43rd second, something like that. And then there's the jiffy term, which physicists show you that they have a sense of humor, where sometimes that's used as a surrogate for Planck time, and sometimes for slightly larger, like the time it takes the light to get across the entire hydrogen atom, not just the nucleus part. And remember, for an atom, the nucleus is a little tiny little thing. That the proportion of the nucleus to the size of an atom, even a small atom like hydrogen, is smaller than the size of the sun in relation to the whole solar system. So, and the other weird little thing that is it coincidental or part of the divine magnificent plan that the world we operate in, that sees visible light and the stuff that we're used to in the normal world, is just about halfway between the biggest and smallest measures and time frames and everything. We're in the trough in the middle. Is that the sweet spot? Is that the spot where intelligent life always has to do, or something like that? Infinite regression. Oh, yeah, that's the other little incident, which is one of the mind blowers, and an awful lot of creationists. I was just encountering several. This occurs both in the intelligent design camp and in the young earth creationist camp. And they have a philosophical conniption fit at the prospect that the universe could have been infinite in both directions, eternal in both directions. You could kind of think about the universe coming into existence and being eternal after that. But what does it mean for the universe to have been eternal? Or if not the universe, the multiverse or metaverse of multiverses? Could that be eternal? And what does that mean? And does the mind break down at that point? But you get into exactly the same problem if you think about an eternal God. So God was always there forever and ever and ever, even though there was no time, or was there time? And at some point in existing forever, it decides to make a universe. That's the young earth creationist concept. And then from that point on, that's not going to last all that long, poof, and they'll make the new heaven and earth. And then we have forever singing the praises of God in heaven for those who are in heaven, and everybody else is roasting for eternity down in hell. And isn't that fun? Forever? Yipes. As if saying their God is not omnipotent. Yeah. YECs are so unimaginative. There's a simplistic, well, I'll give them this. They're building off of a storyline that's a bunch of Bronze Age people who didn't have access to anybody that actually designed the universe, but they're trying to make it up as they go along and make sense of things. Big chunks of the Genesis argument, which we will be noting in volume 2 of Rocks Were There, has been cribbed from the old Babylonian myths, which they acquired. That includes the flood story, by the way. The Enuma Elish is the big Babylonian mythology collections, and it came in contact with that during the Babylonian captivity. And so there was a lot of theoretical backwash into how they would do certain legends and things that were all part of the stuff that they were in for a couple centuries before the Persians came along and said, bye, go now. And away we go. And so a flat earth was not an preposterous notion. If all you could see was just to the horizon, and maybe you go up on top of a mountain and you can see a little farther, but it kind of looks all flat. And then they would have to wonder about the little sparkly lights overhead. Some of them are moving. Other ones seem to be kind of fixed, but they're all turning in a thing. Well, isn't that the big sphere that's going over us? And how many spheres are there? And eventually, would they be working out, are the planets in their own little spheres? And is there a sphere where God lives? And then there's a firmament that maybe is the place that has windows in it that water can leak down. And then there's waters in the deep, because they were kind of thinking in the flat earth that there was like water underneath, and it was like the earth floating like a big frisbee on like a world ocean. Maybe these are all the notions that are knocking around in various philosophies, of which bits and pieces of that end up in the Genesis account. And given the little availability they had naked eyes, they could only see what they could see with that. They didn't do experimental science. Even Aristotle wasn't a particular great one on that front. What could they do? Now, if the designer of the universe was actually responsible for any of these texts, you would have of explaining some of these things, unless they're going to argue that God is so blundering incompetent, saying things to a person as clearly as a Neil deGrasse Tyson would. Is that really plausible? And so why is there no serious scientific information in there? Now, it's not just the Bible that has this problem. The Quran and the Mahabharata, of everybody that has all of these storylines, they're trying to make up stuff to fit the story that makes sense with the limited range they have. But nobody is talking about subatomic physics. No one's talking about how big the universe is. No one's talking about how old the universe is. You get a few little sidebars. There's an occasional like rabbinical writer from the Middle Ages that decides to go zero happy and decide the universe is trillions of years old or something like that. The Hindus who invented the zero just went berserk with it, and so they had things happening over billions of years. They just have a fun time. The Babylonians, who had their base 60, could go jack up things in a hurry, and so they would be talking about kings living 60,000 years without batting an eyelash. Well, wow, isn't that cute? Bad thing about this time frame, it's the middle of the night for me. It's a good thing it's nightly. Yeah. So, well, hopefully my voice droning on like that will put you to sleep. That could be a nice little bedtime story. But anyway, all of these are absolutely fascinating issues that go at the fundamentals of what the universe is made of. So the idea that microcosm and macrocosm are not connected in some way is the lure that physics wants to put all the pieces together. And so an idea of a grand unified super theory that explains quantum theory and relativity theory and all this stuff, why everything is the way it is. This doesn't mean that it's ever going to give up on indeterminacy and stochastic processes, chance things. That's kind of built into the universe. Sorry that we crossed that Rubicon back in the 1920s or so with uncertainty principles in physics. So the universe is a quirky little place, and it's a big and magnificent place, but so much of it that I have learned has been within my lifetime. When I was growing up, we had no idea whether any solar system existed outside of ours. Now we can name off the planets, and we are measuring and finding out what their atmospheres are and all that stuff. It's absolutely astonishing. And the things we know about the levels of science, yes, I'm on the West Coast here. So the proper coast, the one that faces the Pacific, as opposed to all the poor benighted souls that have to stare at the Atlantic Ocean. At any rate. So, oh gosh, we've actually kind of filled out a whole half hour. Let me put my little advert up for the Rocks Were There. because I'm a shameless plugger. Presumably, we'll eventually have a new ad for Rocks Volume 2 once that gets out. When we get that out of the way, come on, whoops. Peter did a nice little job on this little puppy, and on all the shows that Jackson does with Peter, they run this as well. So there we go. Will contain everything you need to counter creationist things. Well, plus volume 2. We certainly have fun getting all the scholarship down. We certainly had gobs of fun tracking down all the dumb things the creationists say, and boy, just when you think you've run out, no, they just keep on giving. And also to present the science, which is just so wonderful and amazing that it's just insufferable to imagine people pretending this stuff isn't there. And it's not as like it's hidden under a rock. My gosh, anybody that can Google can acquire this information just as easily as we do. So there's no excuse for ignorance, not in the 21st century, even though there are an awful lot of ignorance to go around, and we have a president of the United States who is a gobsmacking nincompoop. But there we go. So the Rocks Were There Volume 2 then will finish out. Remember, the whole thing started out as an intention to have just a single book. And we worked out all of our chapters and all that kind of stuff. And then as we were plowing along, I'm going, between the two of us, this is getting pretty big. And I dropped the horrible thought, I think we're going to have to split this into 2 volumes, which is exactly what happened. And even as it is, the volume 1 was literally as big as you could do through the Amazon publishing network. And the volume 2 is certainly going to be as voluminous as that one. But it will catch everything up to date, and we'll have so much material on human evolution and the origin of a lot of things like the Cambrian explosion and stuff, where we have current up-to-date material. And of course, all the stuff on the biblical flood and the people searching for Noah's Ark and thinking that there were Civil War people shooting pterosaurs and all sorts of wackaloony stuff. Lots of material about the big heavy guns. I think it was an intriguing issue that when I looked through this stuff, what surprised me on the cosmological stuff is that the answers books, and there's only 2 of them that we've seen that cover cosmology issues, and each one has only 1 chapter on cosmology, and they're mutually contradictory in the sense that the material that's in the stuff from 2000 gets shredded completely when Jason Lyle comes in and does his version from 2007. Then so virtually all of the cosmology chapter stuff is relating to material that is in the sidebar Answers Research Journal, Journal to Creation, Creation Research Society, Quarterly, and the various creationist conventions. It's stuff that gets very sparsely alluded to at Acts and Facts and AIG and CMI's direct publishing thing. And so you have to kind of hunt around for this stuff, and occasionally then you get examples, and we're going to be alluding to them, of where one branch of AIG isn't paying attention to what the other branch of AIG believes. They're not comparing notes because they're sloppy. What can I say? So, yeah. Oh, yes. The Gulf of America is one of the effing stupidest things. It's I think in part an indication of Trump's dementia, that he's just obsessed on words and thinks he can just do all the stuff. And I think Google is a bunch of craven jerks for bowing to it. So you can see Gulf of America for the American audience. It's the Gulf of Mexico. It's not the Gulf of America. And anybody that uses, just same way that I don't say X, it's effing Twitter. And I'm going to be doing that down to the days that we finally leave it completely, which I'm not yet. There's still some utility to the thing. But all the cool kids are swinging over to Blue Sky. And I keep track of all that material on in there, which you have much less vituperation and all of that going on in there. And it's a structure that it doesn't have the dead finger of Elon Musk pressing down on it with stupidity and their stupid algorithms and all the rest. So it's going to be an interesting times as we moved along. Yes, do not comply. I can agree on that one as well. And the same thing with even the Alaskans are absolutely up in arms. Senator McCoskey and the governor there saying, no, you really shouldn't change Mount Denali to back to Mount McKinley. Why? Trump and a small bunch of his like oligarch nutballs that are like the Secretary of Commerce and all that kind of stuff now have this obsession about McKinley era and how wonderful everything was. And we had tariffs. Beautiful word, Mr. Trump, in his 8-year-old vocabulary, plays off of that. Well, yikes. I was thinking of absolutely, Lisa. It's easy to download. I have it on my smartphone and I've got it on my PC here, and I often, and quite a few of the people, Mehdi Hassan and a lot of people that are on both formats, they'll be posting material on the one and then they'll post a duplicate or a similar thing over on Blue Sky. But millions and millions of people have been moving over to Blue Sky, and it doesn't have any of the baggage that Twitter does. But I stay on Twitter as well because occasionally I'm bumping into the screwballs, or people are there's other people that have the same kind of attitude of where some idiot is saying something really dumb and they will comment on it, and I'm connected to that network and I'll weigh in, putting my little comments on it, and we get a little enfilade going, all that stuff. I haven't spotted so far any issues of like creationist and stuff on Blue Sky or some of the wackaloon political framework on there, but we'll see what happens as time goes on. I think they have, after all, editorial standards at Blue Sky of the sort that used to be the case at Twitter. But of course, the God King Emperor Trump came along and Musk jumped onto the bandwagon on that. And it's going to be an interesting thing to see. I think it's only a matter of time, given Musk's just corrosive reputation, and this will accelerate after the crash, that Tesla will have to oust him because his reputation will be so toxic that their sales will be just down so far. They're down in some areas like a third already. There are people that I know that might have considered getting a Tesla vehicle, but they can't stand Musk, and so hell will freeze over before they do that. So if the company wants to have any reputation at all, I mean, this would be like the car company having to play off the fact that their lead brand is called the Hitler. I mean, this is not going to do well for them in the long run. Now, whether or not we also get to the stage where we nationalize SpaceX and bring it into out of his hands and other things, this is going to be an interesting time. Not necessarily just during the Trump 2.0, but during the post-Trump period, when by that time we're past the crash and into a whole new environment of politics where it maybe is different as 1932 was compared to 1928. So we're in for a fun time, kids. So everybody stay super, super safe. If you're in ginky weather positions and the like, stay safe and be watchful in your local areas about the politics and the extent to which you can maybe do things. We're in a different environment here in Washington State than other people that I know that would be in Tennessee or Louisiana, where you're right on the front lines of combating nutballs in charge of stuff. And then be prepared once the crash happens and we start moving into a very tough economic environment, for people to stand up and explain in no uncertain terms to their neighbors or anybody in social media, sorry, but we told you this was coming. This is not a shock. And here's why. Here's what the reasons were. You were lied to by a bunch of oligarch nincompoops, and you believe them, sad to say. Well, time to wake up and smell the coffee, and let's get some actual reforms done. Let's have a thing that will be as big a transformation as the New Deal was in the 1930s, or the trust busting that was going on in that post-McKinley era that I'm assuming Mr. Trump and his little minions are totally oblivious to. So anyway, Oregon, well, if you're in the metropolitan area, definitely. If you're in rural Oregon, over on the east side of the state, it's often Trumpista country, just like a lot of the rural areas in Washington State are, and most of Idaho, which is a weird circumstance, although women have had to come over to Spokane for abortion health care because Idaho is a retrograde state. Anyway, all of those things are going to be in flux because we didn't take the safe route and have Kamala Harris. Don't blame me. I voted for Harris. And instead, we've got this mess that we're going to have to weather through. It's going to be exciting times, kids. So everybody, stay safe. Watch out for the wooden penguins. And we will be seeing you next week. Should have the links and crap in for this episode